Hey, welcome to the Scott Mann Podcast. We've got an amazing episode today with my buddy Ben Owen. Now, let me just read you a little bit about Ben. He is a dad of 8. He's a serial entrepreneur and a formerly addicted, alcoholic, and homeless Army veteran. Along with his wife, Jess, Ben has founded or co-founded multiple nonprofits to support a host of issues, to include supporting homeless veterans, supporting homeless veterans, anti-human trafficking, refugee evacuation, helping children and their parents involved in the drug trade, and more. Now, their organizations, he and Jess, they include Flanders Field, We Fight Monsters, and Black Rifle Company, Not Coffee, and Moral Compass Federation. They're part of that. So Ben Owen is a dear friend of mine. In fact, he's a brother, and he's somebody that I have the highest regard for. And what I want you to notice in this interview is just out of the ashes of despair and addiction, the things that they have been able to accomplish are just incredible, and I think really represent for the rest of us what's possible for us if we just dig into this aspect of purpose and human connection. And nobody will lay that out better than Ben. Now, the other thing is we did a pairing. We try to do pairings when we do guest interviews, and we had the honor of having Ayman, who is a law enforcement officer from the Northeast, come in. And but here's the thing. If you want to see them together, Ben, Jess, and Ayman, almost like, different sides of the tracks, law enforcement and addiction, working in the same kind of mission to restore hope and to bring human connection to the most trust-depleted places that people have given up on, you need to go to Patreon and see what happened when they came over to the house for a barbecue and the amazing conversations and the behind-the-scenes stuff that we had. It's just phenomenal. And the only place you can see it is on the Scott Mann Patreon page, right? It's the gathering of Ayman, Ben, and Jess before we did the interviews, and you got to check this out. But for now, without any further ado, let's jump into this amazing interview with my buddy, Ben Owen. I'll see you on the other side. Welcome to the Scott Mann Podcast, where we connect like our lives depend on it. Well, hey everybody, welcome to the Scott Mann Podcast. And this is one I've been looking forward to for a while. It's my buddy Ben. And we're in here. We're gonna get into it in just a second. But here's something. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. It's what do you think? What do you think of the new digs?
I absolutely love your studio. This is awesome. I've seen that wall plenty of times.
Yes, you have.
I've put a couple of accoutrements on it.
You got buddies on that wall.
I do.
Yep.
And I think this is like by far the most beautiful iteration of that wall.
And weren't you in the audience when Jazz and Legend presented this flag, or was that the other?
No, I was actually standing there holding the flag.
You were holding the flag.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Thank you. I'm sorry. My brain's been.
That's the only time I've ever seen Scott Mann speechless.
I literally could not think of anything to say. So I think it's only fitting that those are staring at us while we have this conversation today. A lot of you may not know this, but Ben and I have been buddies a long time, all the way back to the Afghanistan withdrawal. That's where we got to know each other, like a lot of the folks that are engaged now on problem sets. And but we've also become friends through recovery and just a range of other things. And his projects, huge fan of it. So we're going to talk about a lot of that today. One of the things, though, I'm just going to tell you up front, if you're watching this right now, there's a strong, this thing is coming on the heels of a massively impactful interview that he's done with Sean Ryan. And one of the things that we really try to do here on the Scott Mann Podcast, because our focus is human connection, is to really encourage you, go back, even if you got to stop this right now, go back and watch the interview with Ben and Sean. Super important, because that's straight up backstory.
Yeah, it sets the stage
really
for what we're going to be talking about.
And we're going to go accelerated conversations. Now, if you don't, it's fine. We'll catch you up. We'll give you context to catch up. But if you really want to maximize, that's what this conversation is going to be today, a conversation around some of the more poignant highlights of the discussions that you had with Sean. So one of the things, Ben, just to get right into it, and we will unveil and unravel your past as we go, but take us back to, I want you to reflect on one of the most powerful, impactful moments in your addiction. You know, like for example, you told me at the time when you woke up out in the yard outside the trap house there, like whatever you want to talk, but just take us to one of those moments where I'm talking all is lost, brother. Like where the shit was about as low as you thought it could go. Take us to that moment. What's happening? What's going on in your head?
So the moment you're talking about, out in the empty lot on Melrose Street, that was rock bottom for me.
Okay.
So in my mind, the way I replay it wasn't like an all is lost. It's like I finally fucking found worms. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like in hindsight, we did that story, and it was obviously the moment that changed my entire life, but it wasn't the darkest, not by a long shot. Because at that point in time, you know, I had Jess, I had hope, I had been in recovery, and so I think the darkest moment for me. Well, there's a couple of them. Would have been when I was on Shady Lane in South Memphis. It was 2014. I hadn't met Jess yet. I had just been bonded out of jail by my drug dealer. And my wife filed for divorce. I had a warrant get put out on me for 14 felonies. And I was looking at a lot of time. I mean, like decades. And this was the first time I'd ever been arrested.
Wow.
For context, I got pulled over with my own drugs, my own guns, a lawfully owned suppressor, and a lawfully owned submachine gun. And when you have all of those things together, it's typically frowned upon by agencies like the ATF. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I mean, they charged me like I was Pablo Escobar. Some paperwork got messed up, and I was able to make bond when I shouldn't have been. And so the second the court figured that out, obviously a warrant went out for 14 additional felonies that they had failed to put on me. So let me just set the stage. 3 weeks before I got arrested, it was the 4th of July, 2014. My wife at the time and mother of 5 of my children, who I've known since I was 12 years old, she packed up and left.
Right.
And told me we were done. I was dope sick as hell because I was using such large quantities of heroin at the time that if I went to sleep, it was physiologically impossible not to wake up dope sick. But I was still trying to quit, so I wouldn't buy enough for the next day. I would wake up knowing I'm going to have to punish myself now and drive all the way to the dope man in South Memphis to get well.
And how much were you spending a day at this point on dope?
$800 a day.
$800 a day. So you had a successful business.
I had a very successful business up until like that moment.
Until you didn't.
Until I did. Yeah. Everything worked great until it didn't, right? You know, my habit was manageable until it wasn't.
Yeah.
So Aaron left me the 4th of July, 2014. I get in my GTO that me and the kids had
Restored.
there we go.
I got you.
And I T-boned an F-350 like a mile from the dope man's house. It burst into flames. I don't know how I didn't burn alive in the wreck. My ID melted, my pistol permit melted, but I didn't have a burn on me. Anyway, long story short, my ADHD got me there. I'm trying to walk from the wreckage to my dope man's house with bones sticking out of my foot. The ambulance driver had to tackle me. Like, that's how bad my addiction was.
Wow.
So when I got bonded out of jail 3 weeks later, my foot is very much still broken. I had no phone. I had no way to call anybody. And so I walked from 201 Poplar to Shady Lane, which is right across from Melrose Street where you've been.
Yeah.
Because that's the only place I knew to go. I had a warrant. I couldn't go home. And so I went and basically shacked up, and this sounds bad, but it wasn't. I mean, it was just a platonic relationship with this prostitute who went by Miss Texas. She was an Army vet, had been a drill sergeant that was raped in Germany, and so survived a military sexual assault. Ended up getting discharged over it like a bad conduct or OTH, I don't remember, and ended up addicted to crack.
Wow.
Just never dealt with it. And so I walked to Shady Lane. I'm squatting in this house with her. My wife filed for divorce, and I had nothing. I didn't want to get back on heroin. I'm still going through withdrawals. I mean, it was like dragging out. I'm sick as hell. I have nothing. My wife is leaving me. My car is totaled. I don't know when I'm going to see my kids again. I have a beautiful home out on a golf course that I can't go to. I have no food. I'm hungry. And I wanted to die. And the only thing I had was a K-bar knife that was in this house. And I put that motherfucker up to my throat, and like I was trying to get the courage to kill myself. Like that. Like
Damn.
that. To put this in perspective, I was a heroin addict.
Yeah.
I was so committed to not doing heroin that instead of trying to come up with money to get a hot shot and overdose on purpose, I was going to just plunge a K-bar knife into my throat. And Miss Texas ended up coming in and stopping me. But, looking back, like that was probably the darkest moment I ever had.
Damn. Yeah.
I wanted to die.
Yeah.
I really did.
I can remember in 2015, I hit, a point like where I was definitely ready to not be here. And it was one of those things, man, that like, even just my line of thinking was so radically different at that moment in my life. And I was just in a lot of pain, man. I mean, like just mental pain. And more importantly, there was just zero purpose or identity left. That's what I felt like.
Yeah.
Hope
is gone.
Yeah.
There is like purpose is so far off. That's not even so. I had no purpose, and I hadn't had purpose for a long time. Leading up to this, like I was super dead. I was the Cub Scout leader. I coached T-ball. I was very involved in church. Yeah. Just a year prior to this. That's how quick I went down.
How quickly it went down. And so does that factor in? Like now, it's no secret that you and Jess and your team do these amazing things. Fighting the monsters of addiction on the streets of South Memphis. Does that factor in when you're sitting with someone who's in that dark place? Are you able to recall and bring forward? I mean, does it still in other words, does that inform how you act going through all of that? Does it make you better at that kind of engagement and intervention?
So if it's somebody in an active mental health crisis, I'm not great with that. Uh-huh. I can absolutely remember how it felt. There's no argument there. Yeah, I'm not good at mental health interventions, but now if we have somebody that's not at crisis point, you damn right that plays into it. Like I remember what it was like sitting right there. I know where they are, and I know that even in my darkest hour, it was another sick, fucked up individual who came to my rescue, and so. Yeah, I almost have like a duty, a debt to repay to that community. And it's one of the reasons we're so passionate about helping these sex trafficked women out there, because they literally saved my life.
Wow, that's astounding. And I've actually I've watched you in action do this, and just in the moments in between where nobody's really looking, and I see how these individuals that have been through so much, the way they look at you, the way they look at Jess, it's like with the respect that and the admiration that you give somebody who's run the miles with you, regardless of the profession, regardless of the whatever it is. But there's just a certain, it's kind of that old saying, if you know, you know.
Yep, and that's
it. And only that look is reserved for them. Is that true?
100%, man. Anybody can help an addict or a prostitute or a vet for that matter. Anybody can help, but to really reach them on a deep human level, you have to have been there. And that is one of the reasons Jess and I are so successful in doing what we're doing in South Memphis, because the entirety of that population that's out there struggling saw us struggle. They saw us dealing with the same shit, pain, and misery. They saw us bleed on the same floors, literally, that they're bleeding on today. So that absolutely plays into it.
I want to take it back to, a promise that you and Jess made to each other, right? But then you also made a promise to the people in that community when you got out. You talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So I ended up back on those same damn streets where I had tried to kill myself in 2014. After Jess and I got together, we relapsed together.
Which is not uncommon.
Not uncommon at all. Side note, don't go seeking love in the rooms of 12-step recovery. We're not supposed to do that. We're 0 out of 10 stars. Do not recommend. It worked out great for me and Jess in the end, but and she'll tell you the same thing. If we had known what we were going to go through from day one, we both would have thrown deuces. Even if you told us where we'd be today, we would not willingly go through that.
So you and I both in recovery for some years. I can't remember hardly any cases where it worked.
It doesn't. It doesn't work.
But it has with y'all.
It has with us.
Tell us about that promise and how that went down.
We had this yo-yo thing going on for a while. We build businesses, make money, and make a lot of money, do really well, and then relapse and burn it off the ground. And that worked.
Both of you guys would do that.
Both of us, yeah. It worked until it didn't. Yeah. And so January 5th of 2019, like all the chickens came home to roost. We lost our truck. It broke down.
Yeah.
And in that same moment, I called Jess to tell her I'm not going to be back with dope on time because the truck just shit the bed. She's telling me that 3 linebackers have come to evict us from our house that we were renting from a rapper. So, side note, if you're renting a house from a rapper, make sure you pay rent on time.
Seems like solid advice.
So we ended up living on the trap house, and we were no longer welcome there because we ran out of money. We were living on the streets of South Memphis, and we had a foxhole prayer as people tend to have when all is lost, and it was, God, if you'll get us out of this together, we swear we'll spend the rest of our lives coming back for the people we leave behind. And we would pray this in the trap house. We would pray this with prostitutes. We'd pray this with other addicts. We'd pray it together. We'd pray it apart. And for 6 months straight, we said that prayer probably a dozen times a day.
Out loud.
Out loud. I'd go to sleep saying it. And I meant it. I meant it with every fiber of my being.
Yeah.
In May of 2019, I finally hit rock bottom. I had that day I woke up in the empty lot, covered in blood. And to this day, I don't know whose blood it was. It wasn't mine. I didn't know that when I woke up. But I hit rock bottom and I left South Memphis. I left Memphis. I left Jess. I left everything. And a week later, she called me to come get her. And I did. And we both went to Georgia. We hit the Mississippi state line heading south on 78 Lamar out of Memphis, and I took a picture in the rearview mirror. And I'll never forget this. I've told the story a bunch, but it's like etched into my memory. And I remember posting it to Facebook, like all dramatic, like, I'm leaving Memphis in the rearview for good. And I posted that, and that was going to be the last I ever saw of Memphis.
Yeah.
We didn't even make it another 5 miles. I looked at Jess, and I was like, dude, God wants us to go back to Memphis. And we had a hilarious laugh about that because I just felt like my work in Memphis wasn't done. Now, I haven't worked in months at this point, but it was God reminding me about that promise. And
what year was that? Just so I want to get some context.
2019.
2019.
Yeah.
Okay. And Memphis is in the rearview mirror, and you guys are finally getting out, heading to Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And from that point, you went into recovery. Did you guys stay clean? How did that work?
So I did not. I got a job at a data company, and my intent from day one was to learn how they're doing big data for targeted audiences for digital advertising, because I wanted to take what I had previously made my living from, black rifles, an e-commerce gun shop. I wanted to apply my consumer data from that to the broader picture of the entire internet and come up with a way outside of the walled gardens of Google and Facebook to advertise gun products. So I never intended to stay at this business, but I did intend to fit in and learn. And this place had cold beer in the refrigerators that we were welcome to on Fridays, and I partook in that. So my actual clean date's October 4th of 2019.
A lot of people don't understand, I think, with addicts and alcoholics, is that, and I don't know, I can only speak for me, but if I pick up one friggin' beer, all this time later, I'm gone, man. Like, I'm off to the races.
Oh yeah, look, alcohol.
Like it never, like Serve Pro, kind of like what we did with the Afghanistan war.
Yeah,
like it never even happened.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
You're exactly right, man. In fact, I've got a great example of that. Alcohol's always been my biggest problem. Heroin's what I ruined my life with. Crack's
really?
what I really put it
so
in the ground.
Was the
alcohol's always my biggest problem.
I guess I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was the common denominator in every bad decision I've ever made, ever. In 2012, this is before heroin. All right, yeah. 2012, I went to rehab in Georgia trying to quit drinking. This is before drugs, right? And I stayed in detox, and I decided I didn't need to complete rehab. That was a terrible decision. Within 72 hours of ending up back in Memphis, I walked into Baptist East's ER, and according to them, set the Tennessee state record for ambulatory blood alcohol content. I was blowing a 0.46.
Good Lord.
Coherent, and get this, denying that I'd had anything to drink.
Wow. Man, that's insane.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
Like it never even happened.
Like it never even happened.
It's like I never stopped.
How many guys and girls, as a segue, but did you see like in recovery, they'd come in for a year? That year mark was a dangerous mark, man. I don't know how many people. I managed to stay away from that, but like I saw a lot of friends go out at 1 year.
Yeah, Jess and I did too. When we met, she had been clean for 3 months, 4 months. I'd been clean for about a month, and we made it to a year, and then we relapsed together.
Was there when you think about, because, there's, at least in the recovery, the 12-step program that I was in, and I'm sure it's the same with yours. I mean, anonymity is encouraged. I made a conscious decision. It wasn't that long ago that I just thought, kind of done with the anonymity. I get it and I understand it, but for me, I've lost so many friends to addiction and alcoholism, and particularly now coming out of the longest war in our history. I find that actually talking about it and my mistakes with it and the things I did, it's almost kind of like it's like a 12-step type approach to me. And I find it to be the right thing for me.
It very much is for me too. Jess and I are very much subscribers to the belief that we got to recover out loud to keep other people from dying in silence.
Yeah, me too.
And I mean, obviously, I respect everybody else's anonymity. I just choose to not have any. I want my life to be an open book. If sharing my story, or as you've taught us, putting our scars in the generosity of our scars in the service of others,
absolutely,
it helps me. And it definitely helps them too.
Yeah.
Like if one person can learn from my mistakes rather than having to do what I did and bleed through it all themselves, I don't lose anything by being open.
I feel like when I see you and Jess, it hits me a little hard. Get myself together here. I literally feel like you guys 12-step every single day. Like I've never seen anybody 12-step. And sorry, taking it back and putting it back, what you talked about going back into South Memphis is really a manifestation of the 12th step of 100%. Alcoholics Anonymous, which is where you go back for the alcoholic that's still out there. You
got to be of service.
You got to be of service and try to bring more into the fold, which arguably is what has kept that program from, two guys in Akron, Ohio to, a program that saved millions, right?
That's right. You're exactly right.
But you guys, it seems like you're 12-stepping out there every day. Do you feel that? Like do you feel like it's part of your recovery?
Absolutely. We, obviously, when I finally got sober, I did get a sponsor and work the steps after October 4th, 2019. And when we got to step 12, God just started putting ways to be of service in front of us. Afghanistan was a big one, and it didn't necessarily have anything to do with addicts and alcoholics, but it prepared us for the 12th step deal we had made with God, which was, I'm going to go back to Memphis and be of service to everybody I left. And so, we absolutely view what this is our 12th step. And if I'm being honest, I mean, we're probably a little bit addicted to it. We've gone as balls deep and hardcore into our 12th step as we ever did our addiction. And for a real addict and alcoholic like me, that's the only way to do it.
I don't know any other way to do it.
Yeah, I can't do anything half-ass.
I don't know. Well, we've clearly proven that, haven't we? So I want to go into Afghanistan actually from here, because I feel like that's a major component of what y'all are doing now,
it is,
capacity-wise. Yeah. But I do want to ask you, because I don't know that anyone's ever asked you about this in this way, and I wished I had done it when you were around the fire pit with me several years ago. But talk about your relationship with Jess, like in your own words. I mean, it's just you come across couples a few times in your life who are really, really special in how they navigate the world. And it just always fascinates me to see that and to get the point of view from each of them.
She's my best friend. She's my rib. She completes me. And I don't mean that like some hokey, silly way. Like I'm serious. That is my best friend on this entire planet. And as long as I've got her, I don't even need anything or anybody else. We used to say when we first got together, this is why we were clean. In that first year, that we'd be happy with each other if all we have is a cardboard box. And there have been times in the years since then where we didn't even have a box, and we definitely weren't happy, but we still had each other. We were able to make it through. Jess is my right hand in all things. She's an amazing mother to my kids. I can talk to her about literally anything. She supports every crazy idea I've got. I start a business up and get it rolling, she'll run it. That's how we do everything we do today. I finally have somebody that will chase things as hard as I chase them.
I feel that way about Monty.
You can see it.
I feel that way about Monty. You and I definitely married up.
Yes.
I talked to somebody one time. I think it was I forget who said it. It's like, I married out of my species. That's what I feel like.
Yeah. I can relate to that, man.
What that must have been. So leaving Memphis to get clean and having to leave her behind, I can't even imagine.
it was tough. And my plan was actually, thank God it didn't go this way. The reason I went to Georgia, my parents lived there and had a couch I could come sleep on, but I wasn't planning on staying there for long. There's an 18-month men's program that I was ready to just surrender. If I can't stay sober, I'm checking into this place. And so it is in Forsyth County, Georgia, where I moved to. It's called No Longer Bound. And then I think in the back of my mind, I knew Jess was going to hit rock bottom without me there because I'm the one that was providing all the income. Yeah. And so she did. Within 5 days, she hit rock bottom. And so I was like relieved. I went back and got her. But even when I brought her to Georgia, I told her straight up, I was like, if I can't stay sober, I'm going to have to go do this program. And, you know, we'd worked out with my parents where she was going to be able to get back on her feet. And I was going to, but it all ended up working out.
You know, when it got to the point with Monty and me, you know, she's not an alcoholic and she's not an addict. You know, she still drinks, you know, but, you know, not really much around me, a little, but when it got to the point that she couldn't take anymore, I mean, she had, you know, we had 2 boys at the time. The third, Braden wasn't born yet, but she had the bags packed at the door, you know, and she was out, right? And grace of God, she stuck around a little bit longer to see if I was serious about recovery. You know, that was my bottom, for me, was the thought of losing her and the kids, right? But the hardest thing for me was I had to make that realization like you did. It was really a sponsor that helped me do it. Was, look, dude, you cannot get sober
for somebody
for
else.
her.
Yeah,
like you can only get sober for, and that was really hard for me. It took me a while, and I can remember coming home from meetings because I was doing 90 meetings in 90 days.
I did that too.
Did you?
Saved my life.
Saved my life. And I can remember driving home from some of those meetings on German Street, and I didn't know if her car was going to be in the driveway. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, I didn't know.
Yep.
And that was the worst fucking feeling in the world. But I can also remember at some point I wasn't okay with it, but I accepted it.
Yeah.
And I wasn't going to stop going to German Street.
Yep.
Because I knew I had no chance with her and the boys if I didn't.
Yeah.
You know? And I don't know, man. That was a major shift in my life when that happened.
Yeah. Yeah. You have these mental, I like the word shift, you know, paradigm shift, I guess.
Yeah.
Just the lens through which you look at things changes just a little bit.
Yep.
Sometimes it's a complete 180, but sometimes just these little changes, but it really shifts your perspective on everything.
Yeah.
And it makes a lot of this recovery process easier.
And it comes alongside you, doesn't it?
Yes.
It's like it comes alongside you. And so it feels to me like that's what it was starting to come alongside you and Jess. You're getting your time in one day at a time. And then August 15th, where are you and Jess just in your life on August 14th, 2021, before the collapse? Kind of what's going on in y'all's life at that point before all hell breaks loose?
So we had a meteoric comeback. We moved into my parents' house in May or June, I guess. It was June of 19. And I had that little bullshit job at the data company. I stuck it out because I went there with a purpose. And I want to say it was like February of 2020, I left because I had what I needed. And I relaunched and rebranded Black Rifle, not as a consumer e-commerce outlet for gun stores or for gun products, gun parts, but as a data company serving the gun industry. And it took off really quick. It did very, very well. So the next month, March, we moved into a townhome. Yeah. And I continued to grow in it. And a year later, we bought the house we're in today. And so April of 2021 is when, just a month after moving to the big house that's big enough for all of our kids, we have 8 of them, we realized we've been here before. We have more than we need by a wide margin. It's time to do something because we know what happens when we have more than we need. Now, granted, we're working a program of recovery at this point. We've been sober for 18 months, but I still did not want to be in this scenario where we have access to just tons of resources and can do whatever the fuck we want in our minds without consequence. So we started Flanders Fields which is our first nonprofit.
You'd already started it.
We started it in April of 21.
Abundance can be a mindfuck, can't it?
It really can, and we were terrified of it. Like, we were obviously aiming for it. We wanted to have more than we needed, but when we finally got there, it scared the shit out of us.
Do you think that's when you talk about the human connection thread, right? Do you think abundance is a problem in a civil society like ours? In other words, does it have a shadow side?
It absolutely is a shadow side. I think it creates different tiers of humans, and we don't look at each other the same anymore, just based on what resources we have available to us. And that's a sad side effect of it.
Yeah.
You know, it puts us into like different castes, I guess would be the word. And,
yeah. And I feel like the irony in abundance is because you never see abundance in tribal society, but when you get too much abundance, everybody acts tribal.
That's what
Isn't that freaking crazy?
What a dichotomy. Yeah, that's true though.
It's true. It's totally true. You watch it happen, and I think it's happening today. I mean, that's what I coined the churn, but I mean, it's but you guys had the foresight to know, like, all right, we've been here before. So you start Flanders.
We started Flanders.
And what was it doing at that point? Like, what was your vision?
Waiting on IRS approval.
Okay.
We'd filed for it, and
well, that's a God thing, isn't it?
Yeah. It gets better. We flew my buddy Sergeant Deaton back to rehab. He had ended up just as bad off as I was. And the IRS approved us on August 15th.
On August 15th.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into it.
Yeah.
So August 15th, 2021. Now you had been in the Army, you were an infantryman, and you were injured early on in your
very
training.
early, yeah.
And then you had to exit the
I'm
Army.
barely a vet, but I am a vet. I was discharged for an injury existing prior to service that, of course, I lied about at Memphis like my recruiter told me to. And so when they figured it out, I got threatened with JAG referrals and all this other crap. Nothing ended up coming of it. I didn't get in any trouble. It was an honorable discharge, but I get no benefits, and that's fine. You know, I lied about like 600 things at MEPS trying to get it.
Yeah.
I think we all do. It just came back to bite me in the ass.
Yeah. So August 15th, 2021, that's the day Afghanistan collapses. It's a Sunday in the States. And, you know, what is, I remember where I was, you know, it was just down the road here in Riverview, and it was my buddy Nizam that had been he had been contacting me for a while. And then it popped, and he was on the run. So for me, it was just myopically. I mean, there were a lot of friends I had in trouble, but he was the one I was focused on because he was the one I was the closest to. And so it was very personal. And I had no idea. I was oblivious to all the other things that other people like you were doing. I was just focused on my friend and in my own selfish way, trying to reach out to buddies that could help me help our friend. Unbeknownst to me, this shit's happening all over the world. So how did it manifest for you and Jess?
It actually started about almost a month before that.
Okay.
A Marine Corps intelligence NCO that I had been talking back and forth with on LinkedIn about Black Rifle and our digital capabilities. He hit me up, and just like you remember exactly where I was picking my oldest son Jackson up from work. He was, I want to say 16 at the time. Yeah. I can't remember. He worked at Mellow Mushroom. It's midnight, and Jack messages me like, "Hey man, can we do a quick call?" I hate getting on the phone, so I almost was like, "No," you know. But I was like, "Fuck it." So we did. Jack goes, "Hey man, you want to do something crazy?" Well, me and Jess have been looking for purpose. Of course. So, and the answer is always going to be, of course, if you ask me if I want to do something crazy. So I said, "Fuck yeah, I do." Plus, Jackson's looking at me like, you gonna puss out, Dad?" You know. And so I gave him an enthusiastic affirmation that yes, I wanted to do something crazy.
Right.
And Jack goes, "All right, we're gonna get some people out of Afghanistan. I'll call you in the morning." And he hung up the phone. I'm like, "What the fuck is he talking about?" And so he calls me back the next day and brings me up to speed. I think the Taliban was in like Coast Province at this point. Yeah. They hadn't made it to Kabul.
Right. I think Herat had fallen in the west, or it was close to falling.
They may have been in Kunduz. I don't remember, but it was Herat had gone, but we were ahead of Kabul. And Jack wanted to know if we could use the way Black Rifle looks at observed behavioral data on people's devices, like what kind of content are they consuming. He wanted to know if we could repurpose some of that into maybe getting a psychographic profile on people on the other side of these devices. Can we do GPS mapping? Yeah. Can we maybe find safe ground routes? And in a roundabout way, the answer to all of that was yes. It was actually no, but I didn't want to tell him that. We figured out a way. And so we're building all this out. He's getting me added to like all these, Signal. I get introduced to that. We're on Telegram. We've got all these, I'm getting introduced to all these people. And like for the first 2-3 weeks, I'm like, is any of this real? Like, Are we LARPing or is this actually?
Okay, wait, we got to cover that acronym. Because look, you guys, you'd think I would know, right? But I didn't know LARPing.
Live action role playing.
Live action role playing. It's a thing. Yeah. And there's a lot of it going on these days.
Yes.
So you didn't know if somebody was LARPing. In other words, if they were like kind of
pretending.
Posing. Yeah, posing.
Yeah, like they're just, living in this little fantasy realm. Because like, look, I'm not even 2 years clean at this time. I've not even come out on social media as like a guy with a background.
Yeah.
I'm not an alcoholic, nothing. I'm just the guy that owns a black rifle. And so I'm on all these calls with like these people who were like telling me they're, I'm a lieutenant general in the Marine Corps. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, why are you talking to me?
Right.
So at first I thought a lot of it was fake. And then August 15th happened and I get pulled on another one of these calls. They plugged me into, I think it was ESRI. I can't remember, like some satellite navigation stuff. I've got visibility on checkpoints coming in and out of Kabul. We get little flashing things when there's gunfire happening around the airport. I'm like, what is happening?
It was like the Twilight Zone.
It was like the Twilight. Like I've never been involved in anything like that in my life.
Yeah.
And then comes the list. So this lieutenant general from the Marine Corps sends me a list of, I think it was 13 individuals he needed to get out.
Yeah.
And like he's counting on me to do it. I'm like, oh my God, this is a big deal. I have to do this for the general. So we've got nothing but Afghan WhatsApp numbers in this and like email addresses in Farsi or whatever. And so I start running them through breach data sets. So like if you hear about like Citibank has a massive data breach and everybody's information gets leaked. Well, you can get these things in the dark web and there are people that compile them and most people use them for nefarious purposes. I found a way to use it for not nefarious purpose. I started cross-referencing these numbers and email addresses, started finding social media profiles and I'm just going down the rabbit hole and every one of these families on this list to see, can I make contact with any of them? And like, I didn't know if I should call them because I'm calling into Afghanistan. I'm going to look like a terrorist. Like, I didn't know anything.
No.
So the first family that I had on there, I'm running through the breach data and I find a Facebook account. So then I run the Facebook account through more breach data. I end up with a Fayetteville, North Carolina phone number. I'm like, well, that's interesting. Fuck it. And I just called it. And so this guy answers and I'm like, hey, I'm an American. I'm trying to help. I think it's your brother get out of Afghanistan. And there's this long silence. And then the dude just started sobbing. He's like, I didn't think anybody was going to do anything. And I'm like, well, who are you? you know, he's a linguist at Fort Bragg. He actually works with our military. I guess he was a civilian contractor. And I was like, well, when's the last time you talked to your brother? So the numbers that the lieutenant general had for his brother were incorrect. His brother had been, we were told he was a TERP. He ended up being part of the Presidential Protection Detail. So he's like pretty high up in their Secret Service. We were able to make contact with him. He had the correct phone number. We did a 3-way call because the brother only spoke Dari or whatever it was. And so I called Jack. I was like, all right, well, look, I got the guy. What do I do? And he's like, you need to get him to send a proof of life. I'm like, well, what does that mean? And so I learned about all that. So, you know, we're sending pictures back and forth. And he's like, well, you need to have him write your name on the paper or something, you know, so you know it's really him. And I was like, oh, okay. So he sends me this picture. It's got his last name and Black Rifle Ben written on the piece of paper.
Wow.
And so I get it to Jack. Jack's like, holy fuck, you found him. I'm like, I thought I was supposed to. It was like, big deal to Jack. And so he puts me in touch with Dan Stinson, who is driving a car around Kabul, Afghanistan. And we get this family into the airport. So for my first attempt to getting a family of 11 people into the airport and onto a plane, it's like 8 hours. And I was hooked.
Like a motherfucker.
I was instantly hooked. It was like the feeling I got, I won't say it was better than dope, but I'd been looking for purpose, and man, that felt good.
Do you think that happened to veterans all over the country at the same time? That like we're trying to make sense of this war,
100%,
trying to put parts of it behind, trying to figure out did it matter, and then all of a sudden, I mean, on the one hand, your buddies that you knew are in trouble, so you're obviously going to help them. But the opportunity to actually do something impactful again,
Yeah.
to actually, make an impact in a place that didn't make a lot of sense.
Yep. Well, if you just look at the veteran population as a whole, what's one of the biggest problems?
Well, purpose and identity.
Lack of purpose.
Yeah.
Like you just run out of a reason to be. And that's not
coming from a world where your purpose was like super clear and,
right.
and super
like you
focused.
had somebody to define all that shit for you.
Yeah.
And that's not a problem that's unique to the veteran population, but it's probably
accentuated, isn't it?
It's very much accentuated,
Yeah.
Especially when you got vets battling alcoholism or addiction. You get them some purpose back in their life, and it changes. And so I think that's why we did see this ad hoc network come together as quickly as we did. We had a lot of people that lost their moral compass, lost their belief in all the things that we had once stood for. And now you have a chance to make it right. And you can it's not just a measurable difference. You're literally saving lives from bad guys.
I will tell you on my side, I had a general reluctance to get involved because of my mental health journey and suicidal ideations. I had found purpose another way, which was this wall of honor you see sitting behind us in the play. We had done the play. We had already done a tour. While you were actually still in addiction, we were touring. That was our first touring year. And then we had turned it during COVID, we had turned it into a film, and we were actually getting ready to roll the film out. So like we did everything ourselves. We raised $250,000 ourselves, and it was going on Amazon Prime. We did it all ourselves. And talk about finding purpose. I mean, like I was a filmmaker all of a sudden, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
This kid from Arkansas. And that is exactly what we were about to do. We actually had a launch party set when everything happened. It was going to be Memorial Day. It was going to be September 11 when all that happened. But where I'm going with all of that was I had a general reluctance to all of it because I didn't want to get involved with it again. I'd let my security clearance lapse. I'd retired in 2013 because I was done with it, and because I saw a microcosm of that in village stability operations where we bailed on them and they were killed, a lot of them. And so it was, I could see it coming. But then when we got Nizam in and reluctantly wanted to do that, I felt that same feeling though. I felt that, damn, like that mattered.
You got a reason to get out of bed again.
That's right. And there's a lot more out there.
Yeah.
So I guess here we go.
Well, it was just this vast, complex problem set.
Why is it ever?
At heart, I'm a nerd.
Yeah.
Like, it was everything I've been looking for.
Yeah. So, we formed our little group. You had Flanders. We called ours Pineapple. And, a lot of people, Team America, Sacred Promise. I mean, so many different groups that were essentially doing the same thing, with the exception of a few groups that were actually on the ground. And I'm just going to stay away from that. I want to just focus on the ones that were here, CONUS, Continental United States. But, one of the things I've tried to tell people, like, I wrote a book, Operation Pineapple Express, but I wrote it in the third person. I didn't write it as a memoir because I felt like I don't have the right to write it as a memoir. Like to me, it was, I just happened to be in an arena where a whole lot of people were essentially doing the same thing. I just interviewed these folks after the fact. And I happened to interview people that were left behind and, a lot of people that were really scuffed up over it. And then I just told their story as a third person narrator, right? And it was astounding to me the number of people who did the same thing. Like I didn't have any idea how big this effort was.
It was huge, huge.
When did you start to recognize the scope of it?
Pretty quick.
I mean, you're quick. You're quick to do that anyway.
I think probably September.
You grasp context pretty quickly. I mean, you've had to.
Yeah, that's what keeps you alive out there,
right? But I always, because I remember like seeing you in Signal, and I remember thinking like you were extremely active and effective, and I'd never met you, but it was you were in a lot of different rooms getting shit done. And then you and I met for the first time, I think it was like a year later in West Virginia, wasn't it?
6 months later.
Was it 6 months later in West Virginia when a lot of the different groups gathered? But what effect did it have on you as you went through like the next 5, 10, 15 days? What did you start to notice about you, about Jess? Were there any effects on you and your family as you started going through this?
The first 15 days after August 15th?
Well, yes.
So That was the longest I've ever been awake without drugs.
Same here.
My business partner, Robert and Jess, had to stage an intervention to make me sleep.
Same here.
People died while I was asleep, which I knew they would. I became a ghost to my children.
Yeah.
And you know how it is when you don't sleep, like 3-4 days feels like an eternity. And so this, to me, seemed like the new normal had already set in. But it was going days without sleep. I didn't leave my basement. I'm sitting in front of a computer, you know, and I can't tell anybody in my life what I'm doing because it sounds so insane. Like,
Right.
oh, I'm watching, you know, gunfire in Kabul and getting people around checkpoints, and I'm dealing with the CIA and the DOD, and nobody's going to believe that shit, you know? And so I was very isolated. I was very, very isolated. My kids didn't understand what was going on. If I'm being honest, my parents probably thought I had relapsed. My dad would come over here and there, and like I could not leave my desk in the basement where I had all these computers set up because this was before Abbygate. We're still getting people in the airport.
Yeah.
And if you miss literally one phone call, somebody dies.
Yeah.
Or you miss a gate call, or, you know, a kid gets trampled or somebody gets shot. And so the impact on my family was massive.
And I think, you know, what was astounding to me was as this is happening, you know, for the most part, a lot of this was pre-existing relationships, a lot of it with veterans that had done this kind of work over the years. And then guys like you jumping into the fray who added a degree of technical relevance to it and just savvy, your own operational capabilities. But to me, this is a version of what Global War on Terror veterans did in the 20-year war. I mean, this is how you fought the war. You would, you know, yes, you might be on the ODA that was doing the hit, the SEAL platoon. For me, I was just, you know, as a field grade officer, so I seldom was on an SF hit. You don't want a major on an SF hit, right? You want NCOs on that. But I would be in the operations center, and I was pretty good at it. Like I was pretty good at, you know, leveraging and mobilizing different capabilities to make sure that that team had everything they needed before they even pushed the talk button on that radio. And you, over time, you got good at, and you took pride in that, right? Because those are your friends. And what I saw was a repeat and manifestation of that, only now on signal. And now we don't have any authority. We don't have access and placement. We don't have resources. But yet the same response happened from this generation of men and women to a situation where our institutional leadership just failed us. And had you ever in your life seen anything like that?
No, never. God, no. I didn't even know things like that were possible.
Yeah.
You know, I think case studies will be done on that in years to come, and like things modeled after it, because the buy-in that you got from the average American, especially the average veteran, it was staggering. Like you had people showing up to help each other. It's what I think when we were growing up, we all thought America was like.
I went back through the chat room and Signal for Pineapple. And, you know, we, like you guys, I'm sure we had thousands of entries, right? Thousands of entries. And it was when I was writing Pineapple Express, I went back through and there were, and Meeks did the same thing. Like Randy did the same thing. They all, like 3 or 4 different people looked, and they were like one mention of Biden and one mention of, or 0 mentions of Trump. You know, and if ever there was a group of people that had every right to be angry at 2 presidents in succession, the Doha Agreement and then the withdrawal that Biden most certainly owned, it was that group of veterans who were watching their friends die and trying to get them out. But yet there was no mention.
Well, I think it's because the only people that were attracted, and you're right, I noticed that as well. It was one of my favorite things about it, is because I hate politics. But I think the reason for that is the people that were attracted to getting this done were problem solvers. And when you are focused on solving problems, talking about the problem doesn't help.
Yeah.
Talking about whose fault it is creates division among the people trying to solve it. Because I promise you, if we had done that, it wouldn't have been everybody in favor of Trump. It wouldn't have been everybody in favor of Biden. It was probably split right down the freaking middle. Yeah. And so any mention of that crap creates division and discord among the people who are trying to solve the issue itself.
I call it divisionism in civil society, where like it's an intentional fomenting of division or creation of in-groups and out-groups at a time when you need to bridge.
Yeah,
Because
you
the
can't
only way to
have-
get it done is you have to bridge the in-groups and out-groups. You can't foment division.
You
and
can't
think you're
have
gonna
an
get it
us
done.
versus them mentality.
It doesn't work.
Yeah, and also at the end of the day, it doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter
It's
whose
irrelevant.
fault it is. We're here.
That's
we
right.
want to get there. Talking about where we came from doesn't serve anybody.
What do you feel like if you were to look back on that 15-day period or however 11 days until
Yeah, pretty
Navigate,
much, yeah.
11 days to
Yeah.
Navigate, what would you say were the most significant contributions that you and your crew made? Like when you think back, you're like, that was a good thing. What are some of the things that come to mind? They can be tactical, I don't care, but what are some of the more poignant memories you have that you're like, yeah, that shit mattered?
The people we got into the airport, man.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's no way around. We saved their lives.
Right.
We had one guy that was getting shot at. He ended up getting to Blackgate with his little Camry or whatever it was, shot full of holes. He ran over a Talib while I was on the phone with him because, you know, we had Talibs for security around the Air Force.
Which makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah,
right?
and like
I mean,
he's sending me messages, the Taliban, he was a combat interpreter for 10th Mountain, sending me Taliban messages where they're talking about cutting his unborn daughter out of his wife and raping her. I'm like, what the fuck? And we stopped that from happening. We got him into Blackgate. The connections we were able to make for others were just as monumental. I mean, we had some shitty ones too. Like I had a family of American citizens and green card holders. There were 7 of them. And the 7th one was an Afghan national who was married to an LPR. And the only gate we could get people in at the time was Blackgate.
what's OPR?
Lawful permanent resident, green card holder. So they're legally married. They have their marriage certificate. It's written in Dari. I already know 82nd Airborne does not give a shit. You're not getting in that airport. And I had to tell this kid, he was like 19 at the time, to tell his wife goodbye on the ramp at Blackgate. And knowing he's going to die and I'm about to evacuate his whole family. And guess what? They're in Virginia Beach now. He's not.
Yeah.
But he's not dead. Jess is actually still taking care of him. In fact, he's been taking care of Arizo's family for us.
Let's talk about Arizo because I mean that's an amazing story, and I have ones like that too. And you know, the moral injury that this caused, I think, and yes, it did answer a sense of relevance for a lot of us, but it also inflicted, I think, it heaped a massive moral injury on a whole generation of warfighters and volunteers and their families that frankly didn't deserve it. And I think we asked something of a generation of warfighters that was, I think our country and our institutional leaders asked something of our veterans and their families that was completely inappropriate. What are your thoughts on that statement?
I don't know. Part of me wants to almost push back on that because the government didn't really ask us to it. They just said, fuck it. And we elected to step into that gap because it's what some of us were built to do. I do want to clarify this. Like, I feel disingenuous claiming any of that moral injury. You know, I did enlist in the military. I do love my country, but I never served in Afghanistan.
Right.
So while I hate to see a government that I wanted to be a part of defending fuck people like that, I don't think I should claim that I have that GWAT moral injury over it. Watching our government for my entire adult life, bureaucracy kills people. So none of what happened was a shock to me in the collapse, in the withdrawal, in the abandonment. What actually shocked me, and if we're going to talk about something that did cause moral injury in Ben Owen, it was that our government was actively fighting us.
Yeah.
Trying to save lives that were put in danger through service to that same government. That's unconscionable to me. That is not what this nation has ever stood for.
Yeah.
And so there was a massive disillusionment that happened.
Yeah. I will tell you, I have a similar, and that's where I come from. My version of them asking it was that you had a whole host of, and they know how I feel this way, and I don't get many Christmas cards from them, but a whole host of flag officers,
right,
senior diplomats, and policymakers that either sat on their hands and made phone calls on their cell phones, their private cells, to veterans that had served them over the years and asked them to get their guy out.
Okay, you're actually right. I had completely forgot. We got a call from a former Secretary of State. We got a call from a former Secretary of Defense.
I got a call from Kamala Harris's military aide.
Yeah. And do you know what I wanted to say to these people when they would call us and ask for us? And we did safe house their people. I wanted to tell them, do you understand that you have just put somebody responsible for national secrets and intelligence in the hands of a fucking crackhead? Do you not understand how fucked up this country is that you, a member, an elected official of our government, don't even understand who you're asking this
100%. Well, it's okay because just down the road, a playwright and storyteller who let his security clearance lapse 6 years prior is keeping all this shit on his fucking MacBook.
Yeah, like it's this shit's the amount of classified stuff I had sent to me on Signal just because people assume.
See, mine wasn't even. It wasn't even that it was classified. It was that it was the nature of the source. Like this was a high level. I mean, some of these people. It's like, no, there's no way that I'm talking to this person right now. But I was talking to that person, and it's like probably one of the most vetted individuals, in the inventory, because I've seen like the director of a certain 3-letter agency, their partner in the 20-year war. You didn't go anywhere near that Afghan because that was his partner. And now all of a sudden, this dude is asking you to get his family out through a shit trench, or the Minister of Women's Affairs, Hasina Safi, the State Department wouldn't touch it. So we ended up, moving her through our group. And to your point, but what strikes me about this, and I'm just going to go right to it, is it's staggering to me that today, 4 years after the fact, we still have not done a formal after-action review that would be acceptable to an E5, E6 squad leader in the 82nd Airborne, right? It's just we haven't.
But if we did, then we would have to hold people accountable. Yes, and that's what they don't want to do.
Yeah. But then the other thing is that you have, like we were talking about at lunch and we were talking about with Ayman, where you have these people in these groups that actually have these 4-year now relationships with very highly trained and vetted individuals who never stopped reporting or observing like they were trained to do.
And we're just leaving that intelligence.
Well,
we're not doing anything with it.
It's in the hands now of like a veteran and then we have the hubris of a lot of the IC and the interagency, same bureaucrats that roll their eyes at those individuals that say, hey, I have this information.
And then you're going to get interrogated. And how do you have that information? Where did you go?
Exactly.
It's insane.
Why is this on your Mac?
It's insane.
And it's like, well, just give us your sources and methods. And these individuals are like, hell no.
Yeah.
Because that person's going to end up killed.
Right.
And so I guess what I'm getting at is, how in the world do we ever reestablish some kind of social capital and trust, not just with our allies, but with the men and women that this is where my original question was. They jumped into the fray, did the best they could, and now they've got this stuff here. Like, what are they supposed to do with it? How does this end?
That's a great question. I mean, to answer the first question, how do we reestablish that trust? I mean, I'll be honest with you, Scott. I think it's going to take a generation.
I can agree.
I think it's going to, maybe more, because we're going to have to, as long as this debacle, which I don't believe is going to be fixed anytime soon, is in living memory, we're going to have major trust issues with our own government. Yeah. And it's not like
we're going to have retention and recruiting issues. Oh,
100%. We're already seeing that. We've been seeing that. Yeah, and this isn't a partisan thing. It's not because Biden was in office. It's not because Trump wasn't. Like, it's the problem is the conduct.
That's right.
The conduct of our government.
Institutional conduct.
Yes. Like, you can't behave in that manner as the government of the greatest nation in the history of Earth.
You don't get like a relationship mulligan.
There's no pass. Right, no. You have to come back from this.
My bad.
right.
What's up, bro?
It's not going to work today. Well, I think they thought they could get away with it because they did it in Vietnam and there was no blowback. The part they're forgetting is the instant access we all have to information today. the internet has changed everything, you know, and there is this behind closed doors stuff. It's not as behind closed doors anymore. And so when a government or an institution behaves with such indifference to loyalty and to human life, it's going to create massive, massive problems.
Yeah.
And the long-term implications of it are staggering. So I don't know how we fix it. You know, if more of us who were part of this could get in front of people who have the power to make changes, that would be a start. That would be a start. To date, and this spans both administrations, I've not seen a willingness to engage.
Such hubris.
Yes. Yeah. It's like they think it's just going to go away. And while the public interest in this may go away, while it may drop off of the headlines, you want to know when it's going to come back?
Next attack.
The next attack. And that next attack is going to happen right here at home.
Yep.
I think I've heard you say it about a dozen times: where we eat, where we sleep, where we play.
That's right.
Where we pray. It's coming here.
Yeah.
And
it has to. Like it just makes too much. And that's not even class. Like that's just looking at the tea leaves and the indicators and having any basic 101 degree of, you know, analysis on this particular enemy, their multi-century narrative, how they operate, their precedent for, you know, localized attacks over the last 5 years. It's not hard. And then when you take what the people are telling, guys like you and Sarah Adams and others, you know, which, by the way, I just have a real problem with this idea of discrediting these volunteers, right, who are kind of raising their hand saying,
yeah, this ain't right.
There's a problem
something's going on here.
And then there's the eye roll. Like there's some, why would they know that? And it's like, well, okay, you might have some actual acuity on that if it weren't for the fact that you just committed like wholesale abandonment of the people that she's paying rent for their safe house. Like,
yes,
you know, I mean, you might have some ground to stand on.
Yep.
But the fact that you're taking your intel from the Taliban and the Haqqani network. You know, I mean, so it's still Twilight Zone to me, man. And how do we move past it? Like, is there a way? Because I think you're right. I think it's getting guys like you and Legend and others in front of responsible, pragmatic policymakers and leaders who are willing to listen.
You got to have somebody that wants to fix the problem, first of all.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to come out and say it. To fix that problem means the problem has to be fixable. And this is where I will readily admit I don't know the answer. I don't know the solution, because this has been the situation in Afghanistan for a very long time. Does not mean we can ignore it. It does not mean we need to turn a blind eye to all the terrorist training camps that are popping up over there, all the AQ and ISIS. Like, dude, there's a giant fucking problem brewing over there, and it's failure to act is going to be measured in terms of lost American lives.
And it's not Operation Enduring Freedom Part 2.
No, God, no. But like, something has to be done.
Yeah.
I just will not even pretend for a second that I know what.
So do you mind if I ask you, I agree with you. I think that it's such a wicked problem, but it's this notion of just turning the page on it like it never happened, I think is the worst thing we can do.
Like you have said many times, you can't just say a war is over. The enemy gets a say.
They get a vote.
You know, and
that's the difference between, and so many differences, between this and Vietnam is the Viet Cong did not follow us home.
Right.
But ISIS and Al-Qaeda sure as hell will. That's right.
You know, we've got homegrown terrorism here. Yeah. It's already here.
It is. What are your thoughts on, this is a really contentious issue, but I do need to get your thoughts on this, is there's so much emotion around the evacuation, and there's so much pain on that, you know, and you've got men and women that have been on the phone with highly vulnerable individuals and their families. We've got families that are still split, and we're never going to stop trying to reunite them and get them over here. But I mean, at a broader level, like at scale, what the hell do we do with this evacuation problem set? Like, do we keep evacuating mass numbers of Afghans? Like, do you evacuate the Afghan National Army?
And all the journalists and all the educated women and all the lawyers and all the human rights activists and all the doctors.
And I'm not trying to be I'm not trying to be flippant either. How does it? What are we doing? I mean, like, is there a point where after 4 years that we? I mean, and again, Like, I get it. I mean, we're involved in it too. But at what point, if not for our own mental health and our own, because I see what this has already killed one of my friends. He's not with us anymore.
Ended marriages. It's bankrupted people.
How do we land this thing in a way that actually, I don't know, is I just don't think mass evacuation for the next 5 years, 10 years is a solution. What do we do?
Well, I don't think it's a solution either, because you're going to rob every bit of talent from that country. And another issue I had kind of early on in the evacuation was, it dawned on me, the only people that we're in contact with, for the most part, are the ones that speak English and have cell phones. That's a small percentage of the country.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Afghans that served us that deserved the same things that we're trying to get for our Afghans who don't have phones and don't speak English. And so from the beginning, it was flawed. Now, does that mean we don't work and do everything we can to get the civs out or the commandos out? No, it doesn't mean that. But you can't just take everybody with combat experience out of a country. You can't just take every educated woman. You can't take every lawyer out of the country.
Well, especially when there's a hostile regime in power with global aspirations to hit us at home.
Right. And so I think the only logical thing to do is definitely to continue taking on a case by case. If there's an existential threat to them remaining in the country, and they, you owe them a debt to get them safety. But maybe not for all of them, It's impossible to not look at the situation and say, well, we need to get rid of the Taliban.
Right.
What would that look like? Who's going to replace them? Look what's happening in Syria right now. Yeah. I mean, there's so many factors at play. And let's be honest, we have a history of backing the wrong guys sometimes.
Even when it looks right.
Right. And so, what do you do then? Does that mean we continue do they set up an administration to manage the evac on a case-by-case basis? I think the answer is probably yes to that. I think that should be done. There should be
some specific carve-outs. And
a federal agency of sorts committed specifically to situations just like this.
In close coordination with the volunteers.
And then in tandem to that, I think we should be backing, in some shape, form, or fashion, resistance.
I agree.
And here's where I admit I don't have the right knowledge to say who, because there's a shit show happening over there. And the last thing any Afghan wants is another civil war. But there has to be an alternative to the Taliban. You can't leave this damn country that we westernized for 20 fucking years. You can't leave it to be set back to the Stone Age where little girls can't go to school anymore.
Right.
Arizo is a great example. She was born in 2001.
Tell us who she is.
So Arizo is a Shia Hazara Afghan girl. Her father served with you guys.
Horribly persecuted minority, by the way. Hazaras.
Yeah, a racial and ethnic minority, or religious and ethnic minority. There's an active genocide happening against this minority in Afghanistan. Her father served the U.S. for her entire life. He was Afghan National Army until the Commando Corps launched, and then he became a commando. So Afghan Special Forces. They have no pathway out of that country, and the Taliban wants them dead. And Arizo, her dream, her entire life, the dream that Americans offered her was to go to college and become whatever you want. And the Taliban took that away on August 15th of 2021. And so she ended up coming to us the day before Christmas of that year. I played you and Monty the voice note that sold us.
Oh,
it was heavy. The Taliban beating her father, her mother wailing.
And her father a commando.
Her father's a commando. And this girl, she was 19 when the country fell. She got on YouTube and taught herself English. That's how she communicated with us. That Black Rifle Ben picture had gone viral inside of Afghanistan. And so we had a lot of Afghans seeking out Black Rifle Ben and then Flanders Field's Jess from these proof of life photos that were circulating. And Arizo found Jess. And Perry Blackburn's organization actually helped us get her into Pakistan after the Taliban. I'm going to let her tell that story. Some bad things happened. She was able to fight her way out of it. And long story short, she convinced the Brazilian embassy in Islamabad to give her a visa to Brazil. And when she got there, she got on YouTube again and taught herself Portuguese and Spanish. And so she concocted a plan to smuggle her way north. Now, you've met Arizo. She's tiny.
She's amazing.
Tiny, cute little pretty girl, alone, trekked through 11 countries where I was able to pick it up.
Including the Darien Gap.
The
most dangerous place like you could ever, the corridor in the whole continent.
Yeah, she made it through the Darien Gap. She made it through Panama, Peru, Colombia, and we were able to have some friends in the Mexican government and in Customs and Border Patrol on our side.
Because of pre-existing relationships and work that you guys have done at a humanitarian level on other things.
That's right. We were able to call up our
from
friends.
the Afghanistan problems.
Actually, some of it came from Ukraine.
But all that flowed from the initial.
It all started from the Afghan evac. That's exactly right. And we were able to save house her in Mexico. We got her lawful entry into America June of last year. And her dream, she just wanted to finish college. That's all it was. She wants to finish her education. And so today, guess what she's doing?
Tell me.
She's finishing her education. She's a student right now, today, at University of Memphis. She's in class right now, and she just got accepted to Rhodes College, which is huge. It's a big deal.
It's a big deal, and we're going to get her on the podcast. I've met her personally. I've seen like her work in at Gangland Express, and working alongside men and women that have been through some rough times, and she's right in there sticking in. Her work ethic is phenomenal.
Oh yeah, she'll outwork anybody you put around her.
Yeah, and so we'll get her in here, but I think what it is an example of for you and Jess and Flanders and We Fight Monsters is that what y'all did in the Afghanistan collapse started this process that you kind of said to Jess, we're going to go back for. Before that really got going in earnest, I mean, you went to the fires in West Maui. We stood kind of a pineapple version up again, and you and Jess deployed out there and helped make local connections to strategic assets. You got involved in Ukraine and helped out massively there. Hell, you ran Narcan up to Western North Carolina.
So that one was actually cool because like half of these things you've tapped me into, I was able to actually tap you into Western North Carolina and put you with the whole. We had a team, but I mean, if we're being honest, this is always kind of your brainchild. This task force pineapple approach. We've been able to replicate it in all sorts of catastrophes all over the place, and it just works. It just works.
And I think it's something, it is absolutely not my brainchild. It is absolutely something I've taken stock of, and I think I help contribute to, just like you do, and hundreds, if not thousands of others. But I am decent at talking about it. And I think what it is, because if you look at it, it's very hard to get your head around. Bureaucrats can't understand it at all.
No, they can't, because for this to work, you can't have a bureaucracy. There can't be red tape. It is move and fucking move now.
Have you ever read The Starfish and the Spider?
Absolutely.
It is that,
yes,
right? The spider is if you cut the head of the spider off, it dies. If you cut an appendage off of the starfish, it just grows another one. It's super organic. It's almost leaderless in the way it moves. And that's what this is, right? And Afghanistan was the first, I think, shot across the bow, so to speak, on that. But then the X factor in that are all these GWAT individuals for the most part.
100%.
Right. And because they're looking for purpose, they're hungry, they are highly skilled, audacious, lots of pre-existing social capital, relationships.
They've already got the connections, and they're not afraid of. They don't look at a box. There's no box to think inside of.
And they're comfortable taking this thing and using it to network and move fast.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. More so than any generation of warfighters.
100%.
And so you've got this really eclectic, I believe, probably, if America sees, I want to hear what you think about the statement. I think if America sees an October 7 style attack on the homeland, I think it is that distributed GWAT generation response within the signal community that will be the X factor in what happens.
Oh, absolutely. I'll tell you this. That would be the one event that would get me back on Signal yesterday. I'll give up. I'll get back on.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. The ability, and we've demonstrated this time and time again, Scott, you and I, and so many other people, the ability to rapidly respond with needed resources, assess needs, get in there and establish trust with whoever is at the epicenter of these situations. It works. It does. Just fucking works.
And it brings a level of relevance that just no institutional player has been able to bring. And I feel like there needs to be, you talk about putting the right folks in front of this administration, I feel like there needs to be a complete paradigm shift in private-public relationships when it comes to crisis, and it needs to include this mechanism.
That's one of the things I love about the human trafficking space is that the partnerships that you see public-private law enforcement's working with NGOs and nonprofits. At least in my experience, I've heard some people say the converse has been true for them. There's no egos.
Yeah.
We just work together.
It's the problem.
I don't care if you're a Green Beret or a cop or a prosecutor. You don't care if I'm a crackhead, a heroin junkie, or an alcoholic. We're working on the same problem. We're going to sit down at this table, Republican and Democrat. It doesn't matter. It does not matter. We're going to work together, and we're going to move the needle, and we're going to do it right now.
Scott Miller used to say, he was a JSOC commander. He used to say that when we were looking at foreign fighter problems and other things, and it was a very eclectic network like that, although it was part of the military at the time and the interagency, he would say, if you're ever wondering what the metric is to contribute in the moment, it is your metric is relevance to the problem.
Yep.
Right? So like if you're not relevant to the problem, just shut up. Yeah. Step back. It's no big deal. There'll be a moment when you are. And if you are relevant to the problem, step in. And what's astounding to me is when you look at Afghanistan, Ukraine, West Maui, Western North Carolina, particularly anytime Ben Owen was involved, that relevance to the problem thing, the way that you're able to do that is insane. I've never seen anybody move like you move with that in mind all the time. And the results are uncanny. Like he brought Narcan into Western North Carolina because the first responders were beside themselves in certain areas because you can imagine the levels of overdose after Hurricane Helene where it was already bad. And there was no Narcan because people couldn't get in there. We put it out on the pineapple net on Signal, and within 45 minutes, this dude was driving from Atlanta with a truckload full of Narcan and dropped it off at the SF operating base, and it got distributed. And, one of the pastors that benefited from that still talks about it to this day. So those are the positive sides of Signal, Arizo, Lahaina, Narcan. But, we've already talked about the LARPs. We've talked about, I know for pineapple, we became a Reddit dumpster fire, man. I had to shut the whole Signal room down after it got so bad, just like it was drama, and it was almost kind of just once things kind of got stationary a little bit, it was horrible.
Ugly.
And people's mental health started. I had an intervention staged on me that Monty set up with a couple of my buddies. So you are no longer on Signal. Can you talk about that? Like, what's the shadow side of this Signal, this app or any of these end-to-end encryption apps for you as you see it? Like, there's a good side to this that moves fast, but there's definitely a shadow side that not many people talk about.
The work we do, without any doubt, produces a fast dopamine response. All right. It's just like social media. If you see me like your picture, you get a little dopamine hit from that. And so I've referred to phones as dopamine dispensers. I think I've heard you use that term too. And so what ends up happening if you're like me and you pour yourself all in on one of these things, eventually as you're seeing success or seeing failure in it, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If you're all in, this is going to take over. This device, where the hell my phone went, it's going to take over everything. To the exclusion of your family, your physical health, your children, your sleep.
You disconnect from the natural world.
You disconnect from the that's exactly right. I actually love the way you just phrased that, because you do. You disconnect from the natural world. You exist in digital realm only. Yeah. And it can become addictive as much as dope. Because when you're in these rooms, and we've actually seen this taken to extremes a few times, you are who you present yourself as. Yeah. And you are in my mind, I'm the sum of my accomplishments that I've brought to the effort, to the relevance I've brought to it.
As it should be.
But to some people, they've created false identities, and their entire life becomes wrapped up in this false reality.
They're not even using their real name. There's no identity verification.
Right. And
you don't know who you're talking to.
Exactly. And so sometimes you see some very nefarious things come up as a result of that. In my life, it presented itself as I'm withdrawing from my family. I'm constantly looking at my phone. My wife can't have a conversation with me without me breaking eye contact to look at the damn phone. And it's easy to justify because we're dealing in life and death, Scott. It's easy to justify, but that doesn't change the fact that it's negatively impacting my relationships with my wife, my children, my coworkers, my employees. So there's tons of negative effects that get tied to this. And if you're not good at managing that, you got to do what I did. And that's just to get off of it until the next disaster happens that dictates I get back on.
And you and I have talked to the point that, like, I've seen what it's done to you. You've seen what it's done to me. And I think that you've actually run a lot more miles than I have on Signal. So, like, now I know, like, even if something comes up with Helene, with the hurricane, and you asked me, you said, do I need to get on Signal? And I said, no. Yeah. I said, but I do need you to run some Narcan up north for me.
Man, I appreciate that.
And you were like, just give me the grid.
Yeah.
And you went, but you didn't get on Signal.
No.
And I think and I know that sounds, but it's kind of like I write Nobody's Coming to Save You. We have to implement.
You got to put guardrails in place.
You do, especially people that do this all the time.
Yeah, and look, I'll be the first to admit, like, I'm real bad about that, checking my phone 24/7, and I'm not able to limit anything. I can't do anything in moderation.
Right.
I'm either all in to the exclusion of everything else around me, or I just need to stay out of it. And so with Signal, the decision to get off of Signal was made much, much easier for me when we redefined our mission to primarily focus on South Memphis.
Which I want to bring it there because of all the things that y'all have done. I mean, We Fight Monsters, the book that's coming out, is a game-changing book because it really is, in my opinion, it's a seminal work that tells all of us not only how to find our better angels in the journeys through our struggles, but more importantly, how to do things that are bigger than ourselves when it seems impossible.
Yeah.
From the bottom up, right? That to me is what's so astounding about what y'all have done. You honored that promise to go back for the people in South Memphis. But what was cool was with the tailwind of all that you had done with the Afghanistan piece and this new capability with network-centric type stuff and a massive set of credibility that you guys had built, in a following, frankly, of people that really believed in your work. And now you pointed your sights at South Memphis. What was that like? And kind of what's that been like over the last couple of years in where you are now?
It's been cathartic. It's been surreal. It's been healing. We've pulled off some insane things. The first time we came back, I approached drug court, and the judge had told Jess to leave me and tried to send me to prison, gave me a $200,000 bond back in 2015. And told her I was a piece of shit, told my ex-wife no, I was. I mean, I can own that, But when we went back to him in 2022, he had followed what we'd done in Afghanistan and actually asked us to take over to purchase the very same network of halfway houses that he had kicked me out of, 10 years ago. In that moment right there, I knew something special.
Something had shifted again.
Something is going on here. And, and it grew from there. To date, we've shut down 4 fentanyl trafficking operations. We've shut down 1 human trafficking operation. We have recovered dozens of women from sex trafficking. We've recovered 2 minor girls who are being sold for sex. Dozens of drug dealers. We have impacted their journey into becoming either entrepreneurs or getting regular jobs, getting back in their kids' lives, and hundreds of addicts. Hundreds of people turned from a life of crime and are now tax-paying members and productive members of society again. That's staggering. Like we actually shut down the 2 trap houses we used to get high in that I've watched people die in, that my blood is on the floor in. We shut them down, we bought them, and we renovated them into sober living houses.
What's the phrase you use?
Dope houses to hope houses.
Yeah, man. I even put that shit in my book. It's so good.
You did.
It's so good, and it's just, I think it embodies metaphorically everything y'all are doing, like at the most basic level.
It absolutely does. I think one of the most amazing things to me is watching the people that are coming to support it. Like it was already mind blowing to me in the evacuation out of Afghanistan that, I barely even served in the military. And I'm a crackhead, that's me. But that people like yourself and that all these other special operations guys and 3 other agencies guys are not only paying attention to what we're doing, but appreciative of what we're doing and need us to help them by doing what we do. Yeah. That blew my mind. But seeing it in Memphis has been something different altogether. We have agencies that have arrested me that are now asking us for help.
Yeah.
And it's I've heard you talk about the upswing in human capital that Robert Putnam describes so many times, but I'm seeing it in real time.
In real time.
In my community.
Yep.
I'm able to watch what was once the institutional leadership, the top-down leadership in that community buy into this mentality that we need to do grassroots. We need public-private partnerships. Some of our loudest allies are in the city government now.
Yeah.
And so everybody is starting to recognize that this Task Force Pineapple methodology, it works and it gets big shit done, and it enables your average rank and file citizens to pull it off.
Isn't it ironic that the very program, the 12-step program that got you sober, or that was the medium by which you got sober and me sober, is the same kind of approach, the bottom-up couple of folks just putting it together, working from the inside out that you're doing, and that we're doing with Last Out the Play, and the storytelling with Pineapple, our nonprofit, and a range of other movements across the country. But you said two things that I just want to call out from a human connection standpoint and a storytelling standpoint, right? And you talked about how the number of Green Berets and special operators and Homeland Security and all these other folks believe in what y'all are doing and really, are fans of what you're doing. And that's surprised you, but I think what really me too is struggle is what I think binds us all.
Struggle's universal.
It's the universal singular, man. And so even when you and I met in West Virginia that time, I knew you were in recovery. You didn't know I was in recovery. But the minute that is illuminated, it's
instant connection.
A whole different connection, right?
Yeah.
And all of those things exist in ways that so many of our elite fighters and veterans, I think that's why they're drawn to you all. I think that's why athletes and others are drawn to you, is because they've all been scuffed up, right? And then as far as the, when you talk about bringing all these other people into it, it's the old adage that Dr. Carl Rogers says is what's personal is universal. If it's personal to you, it is going to have universal value. And so what y'all are doing in South Memphis literally becomes a universal model. Now, it may not work exactly the same way, but the point is that if it works there,
it'll work in Detroit. It'll work in St. Louis.
And is that your vision?
That's absolutely my vision. I mean, I have to get Memphis off the top 5 deadliest cities in America list. It's been on there for at least 20 years. I have to get it off of that. But the second I do, or maybe before I do, I want to see this expand to other cities, because I know without a shadow of a doubt that what we're doing there will work anywhere. You're empowering the most broken, miserable, hopeless people there to not only find hope and have a reason to live again, you're empowering them to go give that gift away to other people. That is something that not only spreads like wildfire, it gives purpose to everybody that touches it, and it's amazing to watch. It's a story in and of itself. And so I honestly think it's impossible to watch something like that and not want to replicate it. And so I really do believe that what we're doing is scalable, replicable, and would work damn near anywhere. When
you think about where Memphis is, South Memphis right now, and what you're trying to do, who would you, if you were going to say something to the one person or the one group that is really needed in this moment, who are they and what would you say to them right now?
I mean, it's the addict and alcoholic population out there. It's the ones that are still suffering. That is the group that I feel is going to change that city, which is probably sounds crazy to say to a lot of people. No. But not only do I believe that because it is us, the addicts and alcoholics, who are creating a lot of the problem, if we're being honest, the ones who are out there still committing crimes, still getting high, that dope, you buying that dope, you're fueling the part of the economy that is where 95% of the crime comes from. And so by talking directly to the addict and alcoholic population who is out there still suffering and still fueling the economy that's ripping our city apart, if you get into recovery, a few things are going to happen. Not only is life a shitload easier, but we're going to watch that violent crime and all the property crime organically drop. I'll give you an example. We shut down the trap house on Woodward Street. The last shooting that took place on Woodward Street in South Memphis happened that day. literally at the house I had just bought.
And how long ago was that?
That was 2 years. Wow. Oh my God, it's been 3 years. It's been 3 years now. That's insane. The last shooting on Melrose Street, same thing. You shut down the trap. The entire neighborhood revitalizes. You get kids playing outside again. You know, you don't have to worry about your car getting stolen. Life's just better.
By the way, this is the exact same methodology that Village Stability Operations used in southern and eastern Afghanistan. It is the exact same methodology that Special Forces used in the CIDG program with Montagnards. It is the exact same program that T.E. Lawrence used with the Badou tribes in modern-day Syria. Like, this is, you know...
It's not new.
It's not, but there is tremendous precedent to it.
Yeah.
But it is both bottom up and top down.
Yeah,
right?
you have to work both
You have
sides.
to have both.
Yeah.
But what's been missing, it seems like, well, both have been missing, right, in South Memphis.
Yes.
But what you guys are doing, which is also what happened with the Afghanistan withdrawal and these other volunteer groups, is you've noticed the festering wound, the gap, and you're okay. Nobody's coming. So you're addressing it from the bottom up.
And you recruit from the trenches.
That's right. You recruit from the trenches, from the shit trenches, and then you build, you build like we did in Afghanistan. It was the people in those shit trenches that made the impact.
You don't even have to try to grow it.
No.
When you're recruiting from the trenches, it's going to grow itself organically.
Yeah, yeah. And it was those people that actually binding together brings the attention from the top.
That's that is exactly how it played out. I hadn't even noticed that. You're exactly right. We had to start meeting the needs of addicts, and all of a sudden, everybody's paying attention from the high side.
That's why I think it's so important too. Is like when you talk about the upswing that Robert Putnam talked about in the early 1900s. That was profound because it led to the Rotary Club, the Junior League, NAACP,
Boy Scouts, Alcoholics Anonymous.
Right. But what was even during the longest running period in our history of social capital, of bridging trust from like 1910 to 1972, right? And then the downswing started again in 73, and we're hopefully coming out of it now. But the difference was all of those major forms of social capital, like those clubs that we talked about, they didn't have what we're doing right now.
Right. They didn't have this gift of communication and immediate access where you can spread it everywhere.
Absolutely. And if properly used and employed, it can bring the Arizos into the fold, leading us here at home from the worst possible conditions. And that's the other thing I don't think we talk about enough when we talk about this mechanism, is that there has to be, the three avatars I use are the John Wick, you got to have that surgical coercion in what you do. You got to be willing to thump heads. Lawrence of Arabia, the ability for interpersonal skills, right, for old school, and then the Verizon guy. The dude with the obsession for building networks and connecting people and illuminating problems from the bottom up.
Yep.
Right? All three have to be involved for this type of thing. And you guys are doing it. What would be your final, if let's say it's 15 years after you've left this world. My dad always talks about leaving tracks and your legacy. And one of your kids is talking to somebody that never knew you, and they were talking about the tracks you left behind. What would you want them to say about what you did in your time on this earth?
That I helped stop suffering wherever I could, and I love that your dad taught y'all that. That exact ethos has been very heavy on my mind for a long time. I had 2 heart attacks in my 30s.
Yeah.
I've been stabbed. I've been thrown out of vehicles. Like I should have died a lot. A lot, and it finally hit me when I got clean. Like, I'm on borrowed time, man.
Yeah.
I could check out any day. I don't want to, and I hope I don't. Like, I try to stay in the gym. I try to eat healthy. I try to cut back on energy drinks. I'm obviously not doing drugs anymore, but I put my body through a lot. Mm-hmm. And once that I think it really started weighing on me when I hit 40. 2 heart attacks in your 30s is no joke. And even though they were drug induced, they still did some damage. And so I started trying to live that way. Like, what legacy do I want to leave? And I want to leave a legacy of service, but not just service. Like, I want, and I think I've done a good job of this, because if you ask my kids what I do for a living, they don't say Daddy sells data intelligence and digital media. James says Daddy saves people.
Nice.
And that's what I want them to remember me by. I meet people who are suffering where they're at, not where I want them to be. I meet them right where they are, whether it's in the trenches, the gutters, a trap house, and I love them until they learn to love themselves, and I help them get to where they want to be. It's not my vision for them. It's where they deserve to be as a human, and it's just I love everybody. Man, I really do.
And you model it. You and Jess model it. It's not just you talking that shit. You see it every day in how y'all perform, how you live your lives, how you navigate the world. You're putting all of that into a book now, We Fight Monsters.
Yes, sir.
When someone picks that book up, what are they going to take away from that? What's going to surprise them?
Well, there's a few things that are going to surprise me there for sure. Jess and I haven't always had the peaceful, loving relationship that you see us have. And I think that's probably going to be what shocks people the most is when they read about what Jess and I actually went through together, what we came back from. And I'm not going to spoil it.
Yeah,
I've talked about it a few times in some podcasts, but we really made it through some bad shit that we shouldn't have. Yeah. I think what people are going to come away from with it, I hope to God, is inspiration. If two people as fucked up as me and Jessica were can do even a tenth of what we just described here,
right?
Then your average person who's nowhere near as bad off as we were is capable of doing some pretty badass things with their lives. I want everybody to read this book. I want everybody that reads this book to learn from it that if you start going towards things that break your heart intentionally, you're going to find out why God put you on this earth.
Damn.
And that's like what it's all about, right?
If that's not the way you end every story you tell, it needs to be calling you to get that shit down, right? If you don't run towards things that break your heart, how do you say that again?
On purpose, intentionally. You're
going to be clear on what God put you on this earth to do.
That's exactly right.
Wow, that's just fantastic.
That's how you find your purpose.
All right, so finding the book. As we're filming this now, you are in launch phase, but I want to cover right now it's how do people get involved? How do they support the effort? What do you want people to do around this book, man?
So right now, and when this airs, the book is live for pre-sales on Kickstarter.
Okay.
We've got some really awesome things that we're adding into the Kickstarter. I forget what they call them, gifts or.
I don't know if they're gifts or bonuses.
Whatever they're called. Like
really
you
cool.
can get we're doing a very limited edition hardcover book that's autographed with the cover Jess and I liked best. Obviously, for the one that's going on bookshelves, it can't be my favorite. It's got to be the crowd favorite. So the one you picked actually is the one that's on our softback and the one that's hopefully going into bookstores.
They're both great.
They're both great. I love
really
book
are.
covers. There's some other extras you can buy on there. Jess and I are doing one-on-one consulting calls. You can buy those in the Kickstarter. For people that may want to, maybe they're battling something that I think we could help with, there's a list of those. Or maybe they want to mirror what we're doing in Memphis. Speaking of, there's also a very high tier. I don't think we've sold because there's only a very limited quantities available. You can actually make a trip to Memphis and we'll show you.
Listen. Monty and I have done it several times. It is a life-changing trip. It really is. I mean, there's just and I think for me and for Monty too, it was just the people that we met. All the people. Yeah. I hope people do that, man.
I do
that
too.
Is a really special thing.
I think that's the best way we're going to be able to spread this to other cities.
I agree.
Is for somebody to come check out what we're doing.
Yeah, particularly if you're looking to do some version of this in your town or you want to know more about it, pick up that option and go do that because it's life-changing.
Yep, absolutely. I'm assuming the book's going to be on Amazon after that. I don't know if we're going to go with a publisher or just keep self-publishing.
Yeah, well, what we'll do is we'll keep updating here.
Yeah.
In show notes and as this thing runs, we'll keep updating here. And I know it'll be on Amazon.
Yeah.
And so people will be able to get it there.
Audible, we're going to get it on there.
You're going to do the recording of
yes.
it. And it's just going to keep going. And I would be looking for this guy to be on stages talking about it as well. So
that's right.
What did we not cover, man? I know there's so much, but I feel like these are some pretty poignant topics. Anything that we didn't hit that you want to hit?
I want to compliment your choice of microphone, Scott.
Oh, thank you.
Rode is where it's at.
Well, that's this guy here and my buddy Matt Williams.
They've done good job on the road. I love that.
They've done a great job with this studio. So
they really have. I got to tell you, when I watched you and Sarah on here, I was trying to figure out where in the hell is your office. This used to be wasn't Wes right here?
And it was two little rooms. They've really managed the space, man. But listen. Ben, thank you for being on, man, and more importantly, thank you for what you and Jess do, not just for South Memphis, but I think for the country, but for all of us individually, because we get to see you guys stick and move, man, and we get a better sense of ourselves, and like you said, of what God put us on this earth to do and to be. You guys illuminate that every day. There's very few people, I think, that do that to the degree. And I'll just say this, and this tells you how I feel about you too. The only other two people that I know that do that to the level y'all do are Romy and Gabby.
Well, that means a lot. All right. First off, if you guys haven't seen the Romy and Gabby episode, you need to. And it's an incredibly inspiring story. But I would push back on that because I think you and Monty do too. In fact, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but you and Monty coming to us in, I think it was like March of 22, and you told me you were in recovery, but you guys believed in us, not because of what all we had done, just because of what you saw in us as a couple. And you came to Memphis and you shared some things with us. And I just want to thank you because the belief you two placed in us so early on and knowing each other,
awesome.
It's changed the trajectory of everything we do.
Well, you guys are changing a lot of shit. So I just can't wait to watch you do it. And we're with you for the long haul, man. So thanks for being on, brother.
I love you, dude.
All right, love you too, man. Thank you. All right, everybody. Thanks for being part of this podcast. And guess what? We're going to get Jess in here too. And so you're not going to want to miss that one. You're going to want to make sure you catch that interview and just make sure you follow these two and pick up your copy of We Fight Monsters. It's just going to be a game-changing book. There's never been, I've been given some sneak peeks. There's nothing like it on the planet, period. There's nothing like it on the planet. And it's a story that's time has come. So make sure you pick up a copy. Go ahead and go to Kickstarter now and get your copy, because then that's actually helping the production effort and getting it out there and making a bigger impact on the nonprofit level. It's just a much bigger impact to get in there right now and support them on the front end of this thing. Thanks for what you do, and we'll see you on the rooftop.